Hello students, welcome to Al Noor International School Virtual Learning. In this episode, we will cover Chapter 15, Lesson 4, Ethics and Impacts of Biotechnology. Let's see the learning objectives. Describe some of the issues that relate to biotechnology. Identify some of the pros and cons of genetically modified food. And describe some of the ethical issues relating to biotechnology. Students, you can find this lesson on your textbook pages 436 to 439. Now let's learn some of the basic terminologies that you encounter in this lesson. The first terminology is patent. A patent is a legal tool that gives an individual or company the exclusive right to profit from its innovations for a number of years. The next basic terminology is genetically modified crops or GM crops. GM crops are plants used in agriculture, the DNA of which has been modified using genetic engineering methods. The other terminology is transgenic. It's a term that describes an organism containing genes from another organism put into its genome through recombinant DNA techniques. Another very important terminology is PCR, or the polymerase chain reaction. It's a technique used to make numerous copies of specific segments of DNA quickly and accurately. Let's see another very important terminology is the GFP. It's a protein. It's an abbreviation for the green fluorescent protein. It's a protein composed of 238 amino acid residues that exhibits bright green fluorescence when exposed to light in the blue to ultraviolet range, which was first isolated from the jellyfish. Well, now let's look at the profits and privacy of biotechnology. What privacy issues does biotechnology raise? As you know, most of the research in genetic engineering is done by private companies. So they patent their findings and inventions to protect their investment and make a profit. So private biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies do much of the research involving GM plants and animals. Their goal is largely to develop profitable new crops, drugs, tests, or other products. So like most inventors, they protect their discoveries and innovations with patents. As you know, patent is a legal tool that gives an individual or company the exclusive right to profit from its innovations for a number of years. So now let's see the patenting life. Molecules and DNA sequences can be patented. In fact, roughly 1/5 of the known genes in the human genome are now patented commercially. So look at this graph. This graph shows the rise in the number of nucleic acid patents between 1985 and 2005. So as you can see, the patenting is increasing from time to time. And also laboratory techniques like PCR have also been patented. When a scientist wants to run a PCR test, he or she must pay a fee for the license to use this process. So the ability to patent is meant to spur or to encourage discovery and advancements in medicine and industry. But sometimes patent holders demand high fees that block other scientists from exploring certain lines of research. In the case of the development of provitamin A enriched golden rice, patent disputes kept the rice out of the hands of farmers for years. This was one of the disputes or one of the shortcomings. Now let's see the genetic ownership. the Tomb of Unknowns in Arlington National Cemetery near Washington, D.C. holds the remains of unknown American soldiers who fought for their nation. So in order to avoid more unknown soldiers, the U.S. military now requires all personnel to give a DNA sample when they begin their service. Those DNA samples are kept on file and used if needed to identify the remains of individuals who perish in the line of duty. Well, now let's see how genetic informations are misused and protected by legal means. So what if the government wants to use an individual's DNA sample for a criminal investigation or paternity? Or what if health insurance providers manage their healthcare policies based on a genetic predisposition or disease? So suppose that years after giving a DNA sample, an individual is barred from employment or rejected for health insurance because of a genetic defect detected in the sample. Would this be a fair and reasonable use of genetic information? To avoid such kind of problems, in 2008, the United States Congress passed the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, which protects Americans against discrimination based on their genetic information. Well, in this slide, we will see the safety of transgenics. Are GM foods safer? As you know, GM crops are plants used in agriculture, the DNA of which has been modified using genetic engineering methods. So, there is a controversy about the safety of GM foods. The proponents of genetically modified foods argue that GM crops are better, safer, and higher yielding than conventional crops. GM crops require less land and energy to grow, and insecticides need not to be applied to insect-resistant strains. Careful studies have provided no support for concerns about the safety of GM crops, whereas the opponents argue that the safety of GM crops has been neither adequately tested for long-term use nor regulated, and patents on GM seeds may force small farmers out of business. The resistance of GM plants to insects may harm beneficial insect species, so resistance to herbicides may result in the overuse of toxic chemicals. So careful studies of such foods have provided no scientific support for concerns about their safety, and it does seem that foods made from GM plants are safe to eat. Well, now let's see the pros or the advantages of genetically modified foods. As we have mentioned earlier, GM foods have some advantages. Let's see that. The first advantage is to produce higher yields, and also they need reduced land, and also they reduce energy consumption, and also lower food costs, reduce chemical usage, and after more than a decade, no evidence of harm has been found. So the next we will see the cons of genetically modified foods. That means the disadvantage. So no long-term studies. So insect resistance genes may threaten beneficial insects. This is one of the disadvantage. And also herbicide resistance genes may lead to overuse of herbicides, and patents may prove too costly for small farmers. Well, now let's see ethics of the new biology. Few argue that gene therapy for curing disease is ethically wrong, but many ask the question of how far genetic modification should go. Biotechnology has given us the ability to know ourselves more and more. With this knowledge, however, comes responsibility. You have seen how the GFP gene can easily be extracted from a jellyfish and spliced onto genes coding for important cellular proteins. This ability has led to significant new discoveries about how cells function. So the same GFP, green fluorescent protein technology, was used to create fluorescent zebrafish. These fish, along with fluorescent mice, tadpoles, rabbits, and even cats, have all contributed to our understanding of cells and proteins. But the ability to alter life forms for any purpose, scientific or non-scientific, raises important questions. Just because we have the technology to modify an organism's characteristics, are we justified in doing so? Well, if human cells can be manipulated to cure diseases, should biologists try to engineer taller people or change their eye color, hair texture, sex, blood group, or appearance? What will happen to the human species when we gain the opportunity to design our bodies or those of our children? What will be the consequences if biologists develop the ability to clone human beings by making identical copies of their cells? These are questions with which society must come to grips. Well, the goal of biology is to gain a better understanding of the nature of life. As our knowledge increases, however, so does our ability to manipulate the genetics of living things, including our cells. In a democratic nation, all citizens are responsible for ensuring that the tools science has given us are used wisely. We should all be prepared to help develop a thoughtful and ethical consensus of what should and should not be done with the human genome. Well, students, this will be the end of this episode. For more information, you can watch the following videos by clicking the links below.